just pick up on the promise of devolution and linking a little bit to the previous conversation we had about data and evidence. I think there is the promise here of public service reform, a better economy, efficiencies, and higher levels of social inclusion we can achieve in this city, or any city in the north, opposed to what can be achieved nationally. 1 in 4 children in this city are living in relative poverty. It seems to me it's not beyond the wit to try and make a difference. And in the absence of Whitehall trying to make that difference, I think there's a great opportunity and promise that devolution can perhaps bring that. Thinking about kind of the meta-narrative to this story here, I and CLES feel that what we're talking about here is a reshaping of the social contract. The welfare state as we've known it was built in the analog age. We're moving into the 4th technological age and a digital age. No longer can we think about hierarchies, silos, cause and effect, downstream reactive services. We need to think about how we create services with much, much more systems and how there's much more greater confluence across agencies, public service agencies, and across public, social, commercial sectors. And arguably, and I think the argument is winning, is that it can be achieved at a devolved level, at a place level, much more readily than it can be done in those age bureaucracies, in those age silos that we have in Whitehall. And if you think about how you create great places, it's not singular, it's plural. It's the plural energies and confidence and trust that straddles all public services working for that place, but also the private and the social sectors too. So there's something about the totality of place. And the previous conference we talked about data and evidence information. Clearly the totality of information and data that we have in a place should be used for the benefit of economic and social success. And finally, I would say I was in echoing what Andy said there about investing in social, the human capital. I was lucky enough to be on a research trip to Korea in November, and they have good physical hard infrastructure, yeah. But goodness me, they invest heavily in the social capital and in human capital. And in a sense, what they say, I spoke to the mayor of Jeonju, a city in the middle of Korea. He said to me, in Korean, I was getting translated. He said, yeah, it doesn't. My Scottish education system is not that good to give me Korean. But he said to me, we see investment in people, investment in the social and in the human, the individual, as an investment, not a cost. And that simple phrase struck with me because it seems to me for too long, and now Whitehall is obsessed by it, they see welfare, education, other elements of the social aspects of life in society as a cost. It actually needs to be seen as investment, and it should be an equal part with the investment in hard infrastructure. And the northern powerhouse, and if a great Manchester or Leeds or Newcastle is going to have to fulfil its potential, it needs to reshape that thinking, to think of investment in people and in social capital as an investment, not a cost. From then we will accrue economic and social success. So, thank you. I agree with that, Mark.
Okay, so I'm going to start off the questions to you, Andy. Great that you are really interested in addressing all the issues for Manchester that you've just outlined. But much of that, particularly the transport infrastructure, is still a Whitehall decision. So we've only come so far on devolution. Would you push further? Should it be your decision as to national infrastructure projects, or should that still remain within Whitehall?
I think, to be fair, that does have to remain in Whitehall because the sums of money involved would have to be raised at a UK level. So, I'd be a realist and say that there are some things that you can raise. Some Greater Manchester has proven that you can raise some money at the sub-regional level to improve public transport. But if you're talking about high-speed, high-quality rail linking Liverpool, Manchester Airport, Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield, on up to the northeast, then you are talking of of colossal sums of money, but they should be spent. I can't see how the government can say that Crossrail 2 is a higher priority than high quality east-west rail across the north of England. So there is a lobbying job. There always will be, as long as we remain within the UK. But on other areas, I do think the devolution journey goes further. I see it as only a start. As we saw in Scotland, I don't see this as a kind of, here's the deal and this is what we live with. I'll give you an example. Neil rightly talked about the totality of place and the unique ability that a mayor gets to break down these silos in the public services that actually lead to fairly inefficient spending, inefficient public spending. There's a big missing piece in the jigsaw here in Manchester, Greater Manchester, if you look at that, and that's the DWP budget, because that takes you to the human capital point, Neil. I will make an argument that the DWP budget should be devolved here, because a national tick box sanctions-based regime as they've got just doesn't get to the heart of people and what they need to break out of their circumstances. It just, if anything, it holds them where they are and it punishes them. I think we could make much better use of that money if we were to link it to our voluntary sector organisations, if we were to link it to our businesses. I think that is something that would need to happen. Okay, you can't have everything straight away. I'll make the argument for that, but I think if you go down the path that we're describing, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I thought, Neil, that point you said just nailed it completely for me, and it said it far better than I did. That point about investing in people or education being an investment, not a cost. Yeah. The London perspective in Parliament and the debate we've had about higher education finance is that it's all about a cost, all about can we afford it? It's a cost. Surely the time has come to turn that thinking on its head, and I'm going to do that. I am going to do that. I am going to put young people at the heart of my mayoral campaign. I am going to say that Westminster's got it wrong. What it has done now, at least the last two general elections, is prioritise benefits for the voters, the older people, because they are the ones typically who vote, so the free bus pass, the TV licence and other things. And it's paid for that by stripping away support for young people. Now, that is entirely morally the wrong thing to do, because the EMA, for instance, that was scrapped after the 2010 election, that was the grant that helped 16 to 18-year-olds stay on an education. That had cruel consequences in Greater Manchester, because it made the difference for those kids in Lee, in Oldham, in Rochdale, who were on the borderline. Can I stay on? It gave them that little bit of hope to say, yeah, I can. And when they took it took away that hope. So I'm going to make young people my great priority. I'm going to be prepared to make some difficult political decisions to prioritise them for more support than they are getting, because if they don't have hope at 16, then Greater Manchester won't have hope in 5 or 10 years. 5 or 10 years' time, as that generation comes through. And as I say, for me, it's all about, the vision is, I want Greater Manchester to be undisputedly the industrial capital of the country again. Greater London is the capital of services. That's fine, and law, finance, media, that's what it's strong in. We should be the industrial capital again, and you'll only get that if you start to put serious investment down in the people of this area and give them the skills to achieve that vision.
Okay, and the one gap in what you talked about is you didn't say much about health, devolution of health in Manchester. Yeah. Presumably you have a greater insight into the health side of things than most other politicians would have.
Yes, I hope so. As a former health secretary, I'm passionate about the health service, and I've thought deeply actually about the future of the health service, and indeed not just the future of health service, the future of social care, which is very much in the news today and is the single biggest challenge facing local government right now. It's frustrating for me a bit, because I was thinking this morning about the cross-party talks that I initiated back in 2009-10 to look at a new funding settlement for social care. They broke down before that election for political reasons, not of my making, and yet we've had now 6 more years of drift on social care, and that isn't sustainable. Why is it not sustainable? Because if you let social care collapse, it in the end will drag down the National Health Service with it, because what you get is an inability, more older people going into hospital because they're not adequately supported in their own home, but then they become trapped in hospital because you can't get the social care support to get them out again in a timely manner. So one of the great reasons why this job very much appeals to me is the ability to face up to those issues. I believe that the only answer to the 21st century and the century of the ageing society is fully to bring social care into the National Health Service, to develop the idea of one service for the whole person. So this is Neil's point about the silos. No silos anymore. What we've got at the moment is silos between people's needs. There's a silo for physical health, it's called the mainstream NHS. There's a silo for mental health, because they are separate mental health trusts that deal with that. And then there's an even more remote silo for social care dealt with by councils. You can't carry on saying in this era, oh, that bit of the system deals with that bit of your mum and dad's care, and this bit deals with that. It doesn't work. They just tell the same story then to everybody who comes through the door, and it doesn't make sense. I believe you've got to go to a single service for the whole person and all of their needs. And that's what I want to build here in Greater Manchester, a national health and care service. Bring social care fully into the NHS.
Would it not be a local care and health service if it's Manchester or a regional?
Well, I do have worries about it, and I express those, that I do believe in the N in NHS, that the national matters and the national guarantees fairness across the country, that everybody should have access to the same basic levels of care, that waiting time standards should be the same for cancer, for coronary heart disease, wherever in the country. The national guarantees, the what, people's entitlement, in my view, shouldn't be devolved. You know, as citizens of this country who pay our tax, we should all get the same standard of care. So therefore, what is devolved? What should be devolved? In my view, it's not the what that should be devolved, it's the how. How do you deliver that entitlement in this community? And that is a local decision, in my view. How best could we support older people better in Greater Manchester by integrating health and social care? It's not the what are people entitled to, it's the how do we do it. So yeah, that's what excites me about that. And I want to work with the local NHS and local councils, as I say, to fully integrate social care into the NHS.
Okay, I'm going to throw the questions open to the floor if there's anyone who would like to ask anything. We've got one over here.
Hi, Kelly Watson from Hindburn Council. I was really encouraged to hear you talking about strengthening the north and not just Manchester by sort of linking cities. But I suppose it's just a little mention for all those other areas in the north, the ones that support the cities. The cities are fantastic, but they wouldn't survive without the people who visit and work there. And it's about making sure that they don't get forgotten, really, at the detriment of the power being centralised in little areas within the north. So I just want to make sure that that we really can benefit as a smaller area in relation to Manchester.
You're not just the bits in between. We have another one over there. I'm going to take it at the same time.
Hi, it's Abdul Jabbar, Deputy Leader of Oldham Council. Andy, you talked about DWP, and I think your analysis is absolutely fantastic. And you said about your priority is going to be young people. So, sort of linking to that is, what's your view about schools? Because schools in Greater Manchester, some of them doing great, but majority, we've got real issues. And particularly now, Mrs. May is saying about the extension of grammar schools, which you touched on. So I'd be really interested in hearing what you want to do with schools and whether that should be devolved to you when you become the mayor. And then the final point, again, linking to your comment earlier about offering a quality provision or opportunity for young people, is about housing. And at the moment, the GM is drafting the Greater Manchester Spatial Strategy. I'd be interested to hear from you what your thoughts are on that, particularly in relation to development in some greenbelt areas. So, for example, in Oldham, we have the one of the lowest council tax base. 43% of our land is actually in greenbelt. So, unless we try to build, it's very difficult to manage our finances going forward when revenue support grant is supposed to finish by 2021. So I've covered a few points. I'd be grateful if you could go at least 2 or 3.
Okay, well, I'm just going to hand it straight over to you there, Andy.
Okay.
You want to-
I think the point you make is completely and utterly valid, because I have my own misgivings about the George Osborne model of devolution. I was somebody who actually campaigned for the North West Assembly back in the day. You know, that you would have a single. You know, there was the North East proposal that was not approved by referendum, and I was very involved in what was then the Yes for the North West campaign, because you know, I feel that is, to be honest with you, I still feel that is the right level at which to plan rail services, to look at infrastructure investment. And however, you know, life has moved on and identity has become more and more important in politics. So I understand why the current government has moved towards the city region more as the kind of building block, but it's still incomplete, isn't it? You know, rail is about Merseyside and Greater Manchester, isn't it? You have to have the two thinking along the same lines, otherwise you won't get coherence, and indeed up into Lancashire where you are. So that point does need to be corrected. You know, if I'm to be fair to Theresa May, if I hear what she's saying, she's kind of saying she wants to think about more areas than just the city regions, I think is what she's saying. So maybe there's, in what she's saying, might be a kind of hint that she might be kind of taking on board your point. Let's hope so. In terms more generally about the North, what's interesting is that the emerging city regions have already formed a council of the North, which I think is very exciting, because that's what, if we're going to rebalance the country properly, if political structures emerge to give the North a much stronger voice, then I think that's where this whole journey gets quite exciting. Because what government of any colour could ignore a unified submission to a budget or an autumn statement from the combined might of the north of England? And that's where I kind of feel that, you know, this might go, and then that might help everybody. You know, the Greater Manchester might use its voice for Hyndburn, you know, for everybody basically. And you know, so as I say, it's what we make it, isn't it? You know, I think it's what we as a North decide to do with what's coming. And some of it will be the direct power that comes to Greater Manchester, but some of it will be the soft power that we can use for everybody else. And you know, that I think we should move forward on that basis. Abdul, you've read through a whole load of real thorny issues out there. I'll start on schools. This is another one. You know, what would I like to have a? Well, I think so. I mean, I personally don't like the whole drive towards academies and free schools. I think it gives you a very atomised education system, and I think Greater Manchester challenges are very much strategic, and they go across the whole education system. However, being a realist, it's not all a power grab. I will use what soft power I have to bring schools together with the colleges to see if we can develop a better vision of education for Greater Manchester. And that is what I was touching on in my speech. When Labour was in government, we inherited a report called the Tomlinson Review. If people remember that, Professor Mike Tomlinson, and he proposed creating true parity between technical and academic education by reshaping 14 to 19 education. And to my dismay, the government of which I was then a part walked away from that, and I think it was a major mistake, because that would have been a moment to start creating a 21st century education system in this country. And consequently, and it's been worsened, I think, by the current government, we're left with a school system that focuses on some kids, not all kids, if we can put it that way. So the 5 A to C's measurement encourages them to focus on the kids who can get 5 A to C's at GCSE, but it doesn't encourage them to think about those who need something different or want something different, who want a more practical education. And that, I think, is why, when we've had this criticism from Ofsted that Greater Manchester and Merseyside secondary schools are stuck at a certain level of 5 GCSEs, it's because they're doing they're doing as much as they can within the confines of the system that they're working. I think if you wanted to move those numbers forward, you would give a more exciting, more engaging offer to the kids who are not getting 5 GCSEs at 14. And that, I think, would lift everyone's level of hope and aspiration. And it would probably then, you know, create a better school environment, and it will probably lift the GCSE scores even higher. So, you know, that is what I want to achieve. And I would ask the schools in Greater Manchester to work voluntarily with me on that. Let's reshape 14 to 19 education. The vision I've got when I was just answering the point about young people, to give you a specific, I want to create in Greater Manchester a UCAS-style system for apprenticeships. So I want any kid in Greater Manchester aged 13 or 14 in Oldham, let's say in your part of the world, to be able to go online and find out every apprenticeship that's available in Greater Manchester in a way that they can't do at the moment. So they'll be able to find out what is available in Rochdale next door, or even further afield in Media City or in Stockport. And then they'll be able to find out what's needed to get those, what the employer wants to get those apprenticeships. And then they'll be able to apply through a single clearinghouse to get those apprenticeships. And then, crucially, I want them to have a free bus pass to be able to then go and attend those apprenticeships without the exorbitant costs that young people face to travel around Greater Manchester. I also want all of the unpaid internships to be on. I don't think there should be unpaid internships, actually. I think all internships should be paid. But in the world that we're in, I'd still rather there were opportunities. But I want them to be available to everybody. So I want those also to be on a single system. So you can see where I'm going with it. And I want then the schools to buy into that change so that they start preparing young people for those apprenticeships that they want. And I think that is the way you lift standards in our schools, by engaging every single kid in that school, giving every single kid who goes through the door the feeling that there's something for them at the end of school. Because at the moment, 50% of the kids who go to our secondary schools don't have that feeling. And as you know, in Oldham and in Lee, you know, their expectations are lowered by the change in industry around them. They don't have the sense that they can afford to travel further afield. And that has a kind of depressing effect on aspiration. So that's the early thinking. But, you know, obviously we'll be working with you and colleagues across Greater Manchester to see if we can make this vision a reality. I want Greater Manchester to put the rest of the country to shame in the way that it gives hope to all young people in the system. And I think selection, more selection in education, would be to completely and utterly take us in the opposite direction. On the spatial strategy, I know this is going through at the moment. You know, there's a debate going on in Greater Manchester, and of course, we all have to recognise the need for more housing. And you know, nobody can say, "Oh, you can't be an NIMBY, can you?" and just say, "No, never." My problem with it is, I don't think at the moment in Greater Manchester we've matched up use of our space to what housing policy we want. We have a very kind of, I would say, reactive approach to this, where we just scoop out bits of land and let the private sector come and build on it. And the problem with that is, they often build the kind of houses that not necessarily the ones that are most needed in Oldham or most needed in Lee. And they take valuable land, but put the wrong types of houses on it. Because, yeah, I take your point about the council tax base, but we can't just have a policy of double garage properties all over the place, can we? Alongside the East Lancs or wherever they want to build them. We need to use our space for the right kind of investment. Now, some of that will be the higher end properties that bring in improve the council tax base. But you've also got to say, well, we also need to use our available land for council and social housing. So we need a mix. And I think the worry I've got at the moment is that the spatial strategy doesn't seem to match up with the housing policy. And I think you've got to get these two things thought through together so that you make most use of the available space in Greater Manchester. Because once those green spaces have gone, you can't get them back. And if they're covered in properties with double garages, when actually the big local need is for affordable two-bedroom properties, then you're not really being responsive to the needs of your local community.
Okay, I am going to. I think we're getting signals that you need to probably wrap up there.
Take a couple more if anyone's got any
yeah,
more.
you've got time. Yep. Good, excellent. We've got one here and another. Sorry, I'm sending the poor microphone all over the place.
Thank you. Hi, it's not a question so much, but I really appreciate your comments about the building apprenticeship side of things. As a mother of a son who's just started high school, I mean, that is particularly important to me. All I'm wanting us to keep an eye on is that at the moment the university system doesn't produce what we want to then go on, but that's considered the way to go. If we create an apprenticeship system that then becomes the elite system, we're still left with the children underneath that that don't fit into either. So just don't take our eye off the ball, that the apprenticeship side of things still needs to deal with all of the children that we've got coming through.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good
Okay,
point.
do you want to answer, come back to that whilst we're moving the microphone, or?
Yeah.
Oh, should we take this one next?
Thank you.
Morning, James.
Good morning, Andy. Yeah, Andy and I are well known to each other. I'm a Conservative councillor in Andy's constituency. So
He's going to respond to all that provocation.
first of all, actually, I mean, interestingly enough, there are some issues where I agree with you and others that I don't. I mean, the transport stuff, obviously, you and I have both campaigned together on some transport issues in our patch. I think there was some interesting stuff which you had to say. I think, though, that there is one aspect of it which I might pull you up on. And it's not the grammar schools thing, although I don't agree with you on that either. But and it's the danger that we go down the same route that the SNP has gone down, which everything we do locally that's great, it's because we've done it. Everything locally that's bad, it's Westminster's fault. Now, I do think that, for example, and you and I have both had quite a lot of goings on with this in London with the HS2 spur, where we've been campaigning locally for a railway station east-west for about 40 years. And then you can imagine the frustration when we were told, oh, what you really need is a faster train to London, which you have to drive to Manchester to use. But I would also say that in terms of some of the transport infrastructure issues, we've got to look to our own backyard and see where the boroughs in Greater Manchester are doing things wrong, because they are doing things wrong. I mean, I sit on the Transport Authority. Sometimes I feel that their policy amounts to, and I'm oversimplifying and I'll get in trouble, but we're just one more cycle path in East Didsbury away from solving the congestion problems in Greater Manchester. And I do think that, Westminster's blame where Westminster's fault, but I think there's going to have to be a lot of work done, at the Greater Manchester level and at the borough level to resolve some of these infrastructure issues.
Do you want to?
Yeah, so I take those take those two. They're both very, very good points, actually. The first one, well, I absolutely agree with where you're coming from. I feel this is the biggest issue. I've always observed it in my own schooling. That there's clarity for the university kids, but there's what is for the kids who want a technical education. And the problem's got worse as the big industry has progressively gone, because it's become even more fragmented, the workplace. It's even harder to see how you might navigate your way through it. In the old days of the big employers, it was well known in Lee what David Brown tractors were, what you needed to get a job there. But now when it's all SMEs, kids just don't know where to start. And that's what lowers their kind of hope and their ambitions. So this idea of this UCAS system is about raising their sights and saying, look, there's something for everybody out here. And my challenge, I work very closely with the GM Chamber on this, and they like the idea. It works for the employers as well, doesn't it? Because it matches them to the kid who really wants to work in their sector. And the hope is that they will, as they see it work, they'll put more and more apprenticeships on there. And you get to a point, the ambition will be that for every young person in Greater Manchester, there should be you've got to get the grades. I'm not talking about something for nothing, by the way. But I am saying, if you get the grades, university, quality apprenticeship, or I would say we have a third route, start a business. Because if picking up on Abdul's point before about Oldham and Lee and everywhere, the culture is still pretty embedded in the DNA that people will be employees, not employers. Very embedded, I would say. But the chances are that, I don't know, 50% of those kids possibly will be running their own business now. They'll end up doing it as a small, trader or whatever. And yet, there's no culture at all yet about how you do that and how you get the confidence to run your own business. And I think we need a kind of, at 14, you start to kind of develop pathways towards university, towards apprenticeships, or to business. And I've really got a kind of clear sense of what I want to do about this. And it's that thing about hope, isn't it? That everyone's got hope and everyone's got something to aim for. I don't think we've got it at the moment. And that's why I object so much to the grammar schools points, where I will disagree with you, James. It just entrenches this idea that it's the academic and the university is what, it's the only show in town. If you're not there, who are you? You're nobody. And that's what's so wrong. And we mustn't go back to that kind of way of thinking. As I say, I'm all in favour of saying, yeah, tough, get the grades. You don't get an apprenticeship for free. But that's the deal, isn't it? At 14, if you're saying, look, you're going to need to get these qualifications to get into this, they get a chance, those kids then, don't they? They're told what they need to get, and they can aim towards it. At the moment, they're not told what they need to get, so they don't even know what to do. And they lose hope because they've not been given a sense that there's a clear opportunity for them. It is linked to transport, and James is right about transport. It's not good enough. Why is it here in Greater Manchester that we have a very fragmented system? There's no Oyster card. If you're a young person, you often have to pay for a bus, and you can't use your ticket on the next bus that comes. It costs them about £4 or £5 to go in and out of Manchester. That's not right. So that's why the transport is crucial to the aspiration, I think, because if you're aware of an apprenticeship, you've got to be supported to get there. I met a kid when I was standing in the leadership election last year. I think it was in Chester. Maybe it was Chester. And then Kevin's nodding at the back. She was a young person. I think she was working at McDonald's, and she told me she was on an apprenticeship. And she said that I get up every day at 5:30. I said, "Really? Is that when your shift starts?" She said, "No, I walk 6 miles to the job and 6 miles home, because the apprenticeship wage is £2.73 an hour, and there's just no way I can afford the bus travel." Now, in this day and age, does anyone find that acceptable? A kid is walking 12 miles to and from work every day. We're making it too hard for them. I think we're making it too hard for this generation. So that's why I hope you can see where I'm going. And I'm with you. I don't want a sense that there's something for some.
No, I think what will happen
Oh, hang on. Can we get the microphone first?
What worries me is that those people who at the moment think they want to go to university will then start seeing the apprenticeships as a good route, which I think is a right thing. I mean, I myself, my son, I don't want to send him to university to come out with something that he can't use and doesn't go anywhere. So I can see his attention being shifted to the apprenticeship. So all I'm saying is to watch out for that it isn't just a shift rather than an expansion.
Completely. I probably didn't fully get your point, but I see
think
it.
That's so we're still making room for those here that they aren't cut out of it, because it still becomes an elite option as it goes on.
I completely see
that's what I meant, I think.
I mean, what I'm talking about, though, is a system that is about every apprenticeship, and so therefore, at every level, somebody can find something.
That's what I'm saying. Make sure we've got our eye on that there are all the levels of it available.
The other thing I would just say, though, is we've got to be careful not to create new silos, because if you're on the track of apprenticeship, that shouldn't rule out university. If you want to, you know what I mean? You should be able to. It might be that you start off an apprenticeship at 18, but then you plan to go to university in your mid-20s. I think that's going to be more common now, that people will move between these different routes. But no, I completely take on board your point. Just the NHS was mentioned before, and I just want to use that as an example of how life has changed. There was a time in Greater Manchester where pretty much any young person in Greater Manchester could aspire to be a nurse and could aspire to work in the NHS, be it as a nurse or a midwife or a physio in one of the other ancillary professions. I think James will back me up in saying that young people in Leigh don't feel they can do that anymore because of the change in the way we finance education. Nursing is now seen as an elite thing because it costs a lot of money. And here's a criticism: the nursing bursary is going. So what little support there is to help people into the nursing profession is going as well. So it's becoming that is a great example of what you're talking about, I think. That is becoming an elite option. And it's why if I win, I'm going to maintain a bursary. But I'm also going to say, if you come through the system, we want you to dedicate yourself to Greater Manchester's NHS for 5 years in return for getting that support. I think you've got to have a kind of a plan for each of these sectors where it should be the young people of Greater Manchester who are working in our hospitals and in our services, not paying agency staff from all around the world. That is what we should be doing. And we've got these things really out of kilter. And it's back to Neil's point at the beginning. The great strength of the mayor, I think, the mayoral position, is you can pull these strands together and make the education policy match the public services policy and match the industrial policy. And that's the great opportunity here. And I don't claim to have it all sussed, but if you can start to build that vision of how these things knit together and support a kind of modern city region in the 21st century, that's the thing. And lastly, James, on your point, I don't want to be the grievance. I'm probably the person in politics who's probably the most professional, chip on the shoulder, northerner going, I suppose. So, I fully accept that role. And there'll be an element of it's all your fault, you aren't giving us enough money, and because they're not giving us enough money. So that's, the councils in this region, I'm afraid, have been cut more deeply than other councils, and that's not right in my view. But as I've gone on in politics, hope you've seen, I'm somebody who doesn't just play. The reason I'm leaving Westminster is because I'm sick of the petty point scoring. I don't actually enjoy it, to be honest. What you and I like doing is directly helping people, directly moving the communities of the North West forward. And if the government are prepared to do that as well, I will give them credit for what they're prepared to do. I worked with Theresa May over Hillsborough, and I always pay tribute to her for what she did. She was true to her word there. I just wanted to be true to her word that she wants to close the North-South divide. And if she is, then I won't be criticising her. I will say, that's what you said you would do, and that's what you're doing. Well, my worry is she looks like she's retreating under pressure from the right wing of your party, I might say. But we'll leave that political debate to another day. But no, I'm doing this job because I'm fed up with politics in this country, to be honest. I'm fed up with Westminster. It doesn't give the people of Greater Manchester answers that mean something to them. They're sick of it as well. It's got to change. The Leave vote was the big thing. They want change. So I'm, in my small way, going to try and deliver it.
Okay, a new era of pragmatic politics. I think we're going to say thank you to you, Andy, and let you go before we have a final word for the session from Neil. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you.
If you look at other countries that do it much better than ours, it's quite easy to have a skills plan and human development plan for the future. And we've got out of kilter with lots of these things. The economic plan, the skills, the education, the labour market are all sort of out of kilter. I think it needs to be brought together, and that can be done, I think, much more readily in a devolved administration. And I think there's many examples around the world of how that can be done. It's not beyond the wit for us to do it. And two final, more general points that's come up from the kind of questions and a reflection of what Andy said. There really does need to be a deep, deep questioning of the national-local settlement that takes place. I am the kind of devolution that believes wholeheartedly in more devolved power and resources to local areas, but I also believe there needs to be levels of national standards and control and levels of redistribution at a national level too, and that requires a complete fundamental rethink. And one of the worries we have at the devolution at the present time is it's drip, 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 without actually seeing the nation state reforming and Westminster reforming. And that needs to change, I think, and I think an elected mayor potentially has the power to start catalysing that. And finally, about the soft power point that Andy mentioned, I think that's very interesting. I think we have, one of the problems we have had in our devolved administrations in England is there's not been enough singular political cut-through and the banging of heads together of different agencies and institutions. And if you look at direct elected mayors around the world, they would take, if you speak to them and you hear their biographies, read the biographies and autobiographies, they say it's the soft power of banging heads together, which is equally as important as the actual formal devolution of power and resources. And whilst I've never been a great advocate of direct elected mayors, I think there's promise there that there is this soft power to knock agencies and institutions together. And also, link it back to the previous session on data, clearly, in terms of some of the problems of data sharing, in terms of evidence gathering, in terms of where services focus, there's something there you would think that the mandate of a direct elected mayor could actually harness some of that and knock heads together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. So influence and partnership will always trump actual powers. I am going to invite our last two speakers to come up and join me now. Thank you very much, Neil. I think we